Join as we learn Chumash for Friday, Parshas Vayikra, chapter 4, verse 27. Yesterday we learned about the different sin offerings that can be brought because of communal matters, whether it's a leader, the Sanhedrin, the anointed Kohen. Today we continue with the sin offering of the individual. If a person, an ordinary person, a common person, sins unintentionally, he was a regular person, by transgressing any of the passive commandments of God, and thereby incurring guilt. Rashi 20. Continuing, verse 28. Or if the sin has been made known to him, that he did something wrong, the Hevi Karbani will bring a sacrifice, Seiras Izim, a goat, a female, the Niktimima, unblemished, Nekema, a female one, Al Chatasai, on the sin Asher that he has done, that he has committed. Verse 29, and will lean his hands on the head of the sin offering, and they will slaughter the sin offering, in the same place where the ascent offering is brought. 30, the Kohen will then take from its blood with his finger, and he'll put it on the corners and the protrusions of the Ola altar, the ascent altar, which is the outside altar, and the rest of its blood he'll pour at the foundation of the altar. 31. You must remove all its fat, as the fat was removed from the peace offering. And the Kohen will then bring it all up as a sacrifice on the altar, as a pleasing offering to God. And the Kohen will then be as an atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. Verse 31, Rashi, referring to the goat that was brought by the peace offering, because if you recall, there was a sheep and goat that could have been brought out as a peace offering, so therefore he's referring to the one that was by the goat. Verse 32, if you would bring a lamb as a sacrifice, lechatas as a sin offering, nekeva tamima, so too it should be a female, unblemished, iviena he should bring. Verse 33, and he will lean his hands on the head of the sin offering, and will slaughter it lechatas as a sin offering, in the same place where the ascent offering was brought. Rashi, verse 33, then even the slaughtering has to be for the proper intent that it was for a sin offering. Verse 34, and the Kohen will then take from the blood of the sin offering that's by with his finger, and he will put it on the protrusions of the outside altar, and all its leftover blood will pour at the base of the altar. All its fat he will remove, just like the sheep, the fat of the sheep was removed by the peace offering, so too it is done by the sin offering. And the Kohen will then bring it as a sacrifice on the altar, al ishe Hashem, on the sacrifices, on the fire of God, and the Kohen will then be as an atonement for this fellow, al chatasi, on the sin, asher chata, that he committed, and he will then be forgiven. Kasher yusar chelav hakeves, Rashi says, kesev, shenisrabu emurav, that when it comes, as opposed to the goat, that there were less items brought on the altar. However, by the sheep, more things were brought on the altar. For example, ba'alya, that this tail, whole back end of the animal, was burnt on the altar as well. Afchata, so too when it comes to the sin offering, kashiba, bekizba, when a person brings a female sheep, to una alya imei murim, so then you have to burn the sheep, the tail, with all the other fats, with all the other pieces. Al ishe Hashem, on the fire of God, al maduri sa'ish asuyis l'Hashem, on the fires that were made for the sake of God. Verse 36. Chapter 5, verse 1. Now we go to another kind of sin offering, which we would call the variable sin offering. These are cases where a person has to bring, instead of an ordinary sin offering, this is a sin offering that a person would do according to his means. As we're going to see, as they're variables, and that's why it's called a variable sin offering, because there are different events and situations which would deem fit, or what would be considered the need to bring the sin offering. Chapter 5, verse 1. V'nefesh kisechta. If a person sins, what's the sin? V'shama kel Allah, by having heard a summon that they will come, told to come and testify. Who ate, and they're a witness, or they saw, or yadar, they know about. Im lo yagid, and the very fact that they do not testify because they are denying under oath that either they saw it or whatever it may be. And because of that, they have a transgression, they will bear their transgression. So over here, as Rashi explains, V'shama kel Allah, what does it mean they heard the voice of an oath? Bedavar shu ate, the verse is talking about a person who has testimony that can help another person. For example, he knows that somebody owes money to somebody else, and he doesn't want to come to testify. Bedavar shu ate by something that he was a witness at. Shishbiu, that he took an oath. B'shvuashim yedei edus that if he knows anything about this testimony, he should come and say testimony about it, and he does not want to come say testimony. Verse 2, oy nefesh, or if a person, asher tika b'chol davar tamei, if the person touched anything which may be impure, for example, a carcass, or anything which may be spiritually impure, defiled. Oy benivlas chaya tamei, or a carcass of a impure animal, oy benivlas behema tamei, or in the carcass of a domestic animal. Oy benivla sheretz, or in the carcass of a crawling animal, tame, which may be impure. V'nela mimenu, and however he did not know about it. So therefore, v'hu tame, he still is impure. V'ashem, and he also incurs guilt. Rashi. Oy nefesh ashertiga. What is this talking about? This is talking about a touching something which is impure where there is no prohibition. So why does the Torah tell? So the Torah says as follows: after the person touches something that's impure, what's the problem with touching something that's impure? What did he do wrong? Technically, there's no sin. But what happened was after he touched the thing that was impure, he wants to go eat from, he went and ate holy items, or he went into the sanctuary. Which this is if a person willingly knows that he is impure and goes into the sanctuary, that is liable of a punishment of losing or shortening his life. As discussed in Masechta Shvuos Nidishkin, it's explained over here that there's different types of, in this case, where there's a whole technicality that the Gemara explains, that if a person, what part did he forget? Did he forget that he's not allowed to eat it? Did he forget that it's impure? Did he forget that he himself is not impure? Did he know that an impure person is not allowed to go into the holy temple? There's a whole calculation of what it may be and a whole technicality of what it is, and that's why he uses the terminology, v'nela mimenu, it was concealed from him, meaning hatuma, that he was actually impure, and therefore, and he went in and he was going to eat it. In all of these cases, in some of the cases, he may be even exempt from bringing a sacrifice. Va'ashem, what's the thing that he is guilty of? B'achilas keidesh b'biyas mikdash. That means the thing that he is guilty of, that he went into the holy temple, or that he ate something that was holy while he was impure. Verse 3, oy ki yiga b'tumas adam, or he touched an impure, it touches somebody who is impure by a human. L'chel tumase, whatever that impurity may be, ashar yitma ba, that he can make him impure, v'nela mimenu, but he was not aware of it, v'hu yada v'ashem, and then he finds out and that he is guilty. So Rashi, b'tumas adam, what does it mean, the impurity of a man? This comes to tell me tumas meis, a dead body. L'chol tumase l'rabis tumazavin magazavin uzavis. This includes if he touched a zav or a zava, which refers to a male or female who has discharge coming out of their body, which makes them impure. And in this case, somebody who touches them, they become impure as well. Asher yitma, so there's three terms in terminology of impurity. So one in terminology of impurity is if he touches a dead carcass. Number two, which is a human. Before we were talking about animals. Over here, if he touches a male or female that's alive and they have a discharge and therefore they also become impure, and touching them you become impure. Asher yitma, third case is l'rabis and egeya bebeil nida, if somebody who is intimate with a person who is not allowed to be with at the time, which that also makes them impure. Ba l'rabis beileya benivlas eif toyer, if a person, not only if a person touches, but what happens if a person swallows a kazayist, a size of an olive of a bird that has not been slaughtered properly. So therefore, you touching it, that won't make you impure. But the fact that he swallowed it made him impure. V'nelam, it was concealed from him, meaning he did not know. He forgot that he was even impure. V'uyada, and then he finds out that he was impure. Va'ashem, and now he's guilty. Ba'achilas kodesh bevis hamikdash, either because he ate something that was holy or because he went into the holy temple. Now that he remembers, he's guilty. At the time that he did it, he was unintentional. He didn't know. But once he remembers, he realizes what happened. Another case, verse 4. Oy nefesh, or a person, kisi shava levati b'sfasayim. He swears by pronouncing with his lips the intention to harm himself, or laharat, to do harm, or lahitif, to do good. L'chol asher yivate adam b'shvu, whatever a person expresses with an oath, v'nela mimenu, and this escapes him. He didn't realize by doing so he's obligating himself. V'uyada, and now he finds out. V'ashim, he's guilty. Lachas me'ela, to any of these things. Rashi b'sfasayim. What does it mean with his lips? Believe. That means this oath does not go on something you had in mind in your heart. You have to clearly say it. Lahara, meaning that he was going to do something which may cause pain and harm to himself. Or lahitiv latzmei, or also cause benefit. For example, as the Talmud says, if a person says, "I will eat," or I'm not going to eat, I'll sleep, or I'm not going to sleep. Levchol asher yivatei, the rabbis comes to include shavar, even something that he said in the past, that I made an oath that I will or will not. That means it was concealed from him, he forgot about it, and because of that, he transgressed on his oath, he went against his oath. Kol eila, all of these cases are part of what we call a korban oila v'yored. A korban oila v'yored, which means a sacrifice which talks about that a person gives. Oila v'yored comes to the terminology, you give how much you can afford. A rich person would give a lot, so it goes up. A poor person would give less, so therefore it's going down. So these sacrifices all go into that realm. A sin, and as we mentioned, a variable sin offering. It's variable because he would obligate himself to bring a sin offering. However, the sin offering would not be a standard sin offering like we learned in the previous ones, whether it's a bull or a goat or a sheep. But this one goes according to the person's means and what he gives. However, an oath that has in it the denial of money, it does not include in this type of sacrifice, but only in a different sacrifice and offering, which we will talk about later on. Verse 5. Verse 5. When someone incurs guilt to any of these cases that we just mentioned, and he must confess that he did something wrong, that he committed those sins. Verse 6, he brings his guilt to God. And the sin that he's committed. The cave has to be a female from the sheep, kazba, a sheep, or a goat, lechatas as a sin offering. And the Kohen will then atone him, he'll be atoned from the sin that he committed. 7. But what happens if a person can't afford to bring a sheep? Then he'll bring his guilt offering, that he sinned. It can be two turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons. Lashem, to God. Echad l'chatas, the reason why he's bringing 2, one for a sin offering, ve'echad la'ila, and one for an ascent offering. Verse 8, and he'll bring those birds to the Kohen. He'll first bring the one that is for a sin offering first, the Malakas Reishay, and he will then nip off its head with his fingernail, mimul arpai, from the back of its head. V'lo yavdil, but he must make sure not to sever it completely. Rashi, over here the Torah says, generally, the Torah is telling us that chatas kedemes la'ila, sin offering comes before an ascent offering. Why is that? This is compared to lepraket, for example, the defense that comes in front of the court, that comes to appease the king or the court. First, what you need to do is you find an appeasement. You first got to apologize for what you did wrong. And after you apologize for what you did wrong, can you bring a gift? Then the gift comes afterwards. So too, the first thing is the sin. The sin is asking an apology. After you ask the apology, then you can follow up with the oil offering, which is as a donation, as a gift. For lo yavdil, he doesn't separate. That means when it comes to malika, generally when it comes to slaughtering, there are 2 parts, there are 2 veins, that the 2 pipes that the slaughterer has to, the shochet has to slaughter in order to be valid kosher, which is the windpipe and the food pipe, the trachea and the esophagus. Over here, however, when it comes to malika, when it comes to using the fingernail, and when he nips the bird, only one of those pipes has to be cut, not both of them, and this way the head does not completely fall off. Oiref, what is oiref? That's the neck. Ugev areish, that's the top of the Ugev areish, that's the top of the head of the bird. Hamshabel etzad atzavar, that goes towards the neck. So it's the back. It's the back of the. If you're looking from the top of the bird, it's the back of the head, which connects to the rest of the back of the bird, which we would call the neck. Mul oiref, mul against it. When you see the neck, you're seeing basically the whole line of the neck and the back. So where you're doing the malika would be from underneath it against that area of the neck. Verse 9. And then he will sprinkle from the blood of the sin offering on the wall of the altar. And whatever is left of the blood, will squeeze out towards the base of the altar. This is considered a sin offering. However, when it came to the sin offer, to the ascent offering, which was the donation, it was not needed to sprinkle. It was only the squeezing out of the blood. However, when it comes to a sin offering, you have to first of all sprinkle the blood and as well squeeze out the blood. He would hold on to the bird, and sprinkle it while holding the bird in his hand. And then the blood would spray and it would go onto the altar. It is a sin offering. Again, that has to be for the intent of a sin offering. If it was shaloi lishma, but if it was not for the intent, psula would be unfit. Verse 10. And the second bird he would bring as an ascent offering, as mentioned previously in the laws pertaining to the ascent offering. And the Kohen will be an atonement from his sin, for what he has committed, and he will be forgiven. The word kamishpat, like we mentioned, all the laws, particularly by the ascent offering of the birds, which was donated, Reisha Parsh, in the beginning of this week's Torah reading. This concludes the Torah reading for Friday, Parshas Vayikra.